it's really, really hard to beat these Google things for that sort of work. So anyway, plus I live in Germany, and there's a whole, there's an actual cultural institution of complaining, you know, and what's really beautiful and really nice, one of the really nice things about the German is they understand that they complain all the time, and they even understand that maybe they shouldn't be, right? Meckern auf hohem Niveau, for non-German speakers, it's like, actually, like, life is great, but my Mercedes is 2 years old, you know? my navigator didn't update the new roundabout on the road yet. Oh, right? Makes it really hard. I am going to talk about something that I wonder how many of us have experienced, the gap between being somebody technical at a company and being somebody businessy at a company, and how hard it is for either of those sides to talk with each other and understand each other. And the particular aspect of that I think there are a lot of sides to that and a lot of parts to that. But I wanted to try and tie that into what we do at Open Strategy Partners. We work on strategy, marketing, communications for technology organizations. So I wanted to take this situation that a lot of us are familiar with. So how many people would say you're technical in the room? Technical, okay, and how many people are in a business role? Okay, and so how many of you experienced, for example, a really, really, really brilliant developer will tell you in the most minute detail exactly how this interface is implemented and exactly why we chose this particular framework to do this exact thing down in the stack, because, right? Now, this person is brilliant and is your lead developer and had this idea to build this product, right? But all she can talk about is like the incredibly interesting, shiny details of it. And the person in a marketing department somewhere, a business decision maker, doesn't care about that at all. And they have the money to finish it, right? So making that connection is hard, and then the business person needs to see what the business value is. So this translation, right, this becomes really, really hard. And another aspect that we see of this is that companies, you'll have the development team, they'll tell you one thing about their product, and the sales team maybe doesn't really understand that world, so they'll tell you something else, and the marketing person will tell you something else. One of the things we do at Open Strategy Partners is build strategic communications plans. And I want to show you some of the ways that we think about this and how these kind of communication issues can be resolved by building a good communications plan, and a little bit about how we go in about building a good and strategic communications plan. I'm supposed to remind you that at 4:30 today, we're going to have the Splash Awards here. It's really, really good to come help celebrate this community here and all the good work that's happening in Switzerland in this community. So, I co-founded Open Strategy Partners with Tracy Evans here in 2017. We incorporated in October. We have a series of retainer clients and projects that we're working on in and around open source. And our team has grown to 6 people, which is astonishing. And so we're a marketing company, right? Yeah. Awesome. This is not what we do at all. We're applying a strategic approach and open source thinking to marketing strategy and communications. And essentially we say that we want to help you communicate the value of what you make and do and connect you with the people who need to know about it and grow wherever you need to grow. You need to grow adoption, you need to grow your community, you need to grow contribution, you need to grow your revenue, you need to grow your partner network. We apply open source thinking, the idea that authentic communication drives connection, which builds community, and communities generate value, right? That's where we came from. That's what we're doing as a company. So, the tech business cap is what we call the misunderstandings, for example, between the people building a technical product and the people who are trying to sell it. A lot of times you'll find in a company that people are pulling in different directions, even if everyone thinks they're working towards a common goal. You might have your lead developer telling a user group one thing about it, and your salespeople telling potential clients another thing about it, and no one is talking in any consistent way. It becomes very difficult for a marketing department to produce consistent materials or tell a consistent story, right? So that's this tech business gap and these communication challenges. Then I'm going to talk about how we can bridge the gap with the principles that we build communication on: empathy, clarity, and trust, and how to put together a plan that will simultaneously present a united front to the world about what your thing is, what it does, and what value it delivers, and harmonize your internal communications at the same time. So, okay, ignore the next slide, great. So you're building thing, and you've got VC funding, and it's awesome, and you need more money for it because your runway's running out, and you've been talking with investors, and they're like, whatever it is you're talking about, that is so last year, we're not interested in that at all, right? Your developer is complaining about how the marketing department is talking about it in public because, that's not at all the point of my idea. And you have a salesperson saying, hey, buy thing, it'll solve your problems, it'll do everything for you. So what is it? What are your problems actually, right? So nobody has a clear understanding of what's going on. What a business person needs to know, whether that's someone who's going to buy it from you or someone who's trying to sell it for you and with you, they need to know the value that your thing actually delivers, right? And a lot of times it's hard for developers to explain this in terms that business people understand. But we really, really need to understand the business value of what we're delivering. Investors, this is really interesting. Investors are really, really flighty. And, we're encountering this out in the wild. If you name one technology, they'll be like, PHP is so dead. Who would ever put money into PHP? Oh my God. You've got to be doing, right? Pick something that's cool this year. If you're not doing, I'm making this up. Yeah? Like if you're not doing Gatsby, right? I'm just not interested. Whatever it is. Investors are people who got lucky sometimes, a lot of them, and it's not that they really understand that actually we're building a thing that we identified a need for, and PHP is still running 80% of the web, so there's nothing wrong with it. It's kind of like fashion, so they don't really understand what's going on. And then maybe, and this is also nonsense, I acknowledge, and I know that this is nonsense, right? But like, your developer person can only really talk in really, really technical terms. And maybe doesn't completely see or can't explain well the connection between the value that the thing delivers and how the thing is put together. So nobody is on common ground. Nobody has common language to talk about anything. And of course you have the marketing department, right? And our favorite word, right? I gotta put innovation in there. Gotta use that word. Gotta do marketing, right? So here we still see everybody is really, really not on the same page. And frankly, when it comes right down to it, the connection to the person who has to sell it and the person who has to buy it is really, really important. Otherwise, we're not going to go on and we're not going to have a job or a thing to finish at some point in time. So I want to talk about bridging this gap. We operate a communication framework that we've developed at Open Strategy Partners. We call it authentic communication. We say that authentic communication should be both compelling and technically accurate. This is one way of representing it. I think it's a little bit more of a cycle, but essentially, if I want to show you a thing, right, and I'd like you to give me money for that thing, I really need to understand, with empathy, I really need to understand what your needs are, what your situation is, what your challenges, what your problems are, what sort of language you understand, how I communicate with you. And if I then use logical rigor, technically accurate language, and be as simple as I can be and as clear as I can be, right? I should be able to build trust with you so that you can then engage with my clients' products or my own products, as it were. And this zone there, that's what, that was my initial understanding of what I thought authentic communication would be. I thought at the time that this would be a great way to think about how to speak with developers, right? Because we are extremely allergic to bullshit, right? We're extremely allergic to hyperbole and exaggeration and vaporware. So really, really, we're concerned when we build communication, we're really concerned with building trust so that we can then, perhaps show you what the product is and you can decide whether you want to engage in it. Not for emotional reasons because we used the wrong word somewhere, but because it might be an actual helpful thing. So communicating with empathy, and this is really shorthand. If anyone was at our workshop yesterday, we dove into empathy a lot further. Empathy, in this case, is the idea of putting yourself in someone else's shoes, really trying to understand their situation and their needs. And then if you do this well, you arm yourself with powerful information about that you can use to choose which facts to highlight, what stories you could tell, or how to just get the message across the right way to any given person. And an example that I really love, Tracy comes from a pure business world of business degrees and large corporations to startups to everything but completely a business background. And if we talk about product positioning with her and, audience segmentation and the buyer's journey and competitive analyses and so on, she's in her element, she loves it, she's happy, she's smiling, and she actually really, really loves this stuff. Now, especially the developers in the room, do you connect with this language, or does it leave you kind of like actually just checking your messages now? How many of you feel you connect with this language? Okay, all right. See, Dominique, I know you're a business guy, right? So you love this stuff too. Nick, I'm glad you didn't put your hand up because that'll hopefully prove my point. Now, are you solving a problem that people care about? Now, as open source developers, I'm hoping that everyone is now going to put up their hand when I ask you, do you care if you're solving a problem that helps other people? You do, right? Yeah. And who should know about the thing that you're building? And who else is solving that problem? And how are you solving it better? Those 4 questions are exactly what the stuff on the left talks about. And depending on whether we're communicating with a business audience about this problem space of bringing a product to the appropriate audience, if we're talking with a pure business audience, we might use the stuff on the left. And if we're talking with developers or some other non-business role, we're probably going to choose this sort of language to connect with them. It's just a small example. When we talk about clarity, we really need to be able to compare apples to apples. We need to find ways to level the playing field, and I'm going to show you a tool that we use to do that. Common language is really, really important. Talking about things the same way. When we first started out, we were doing some work in the CMS space. In fact, before we started working together, Tracy was trying to build a web-enabled business and was trying to choose a technology to build that in. And Drupal people in our circle of friends were saying, well, of course you should build it in Drupal. The internet was saying a lot of other things. And if you go, and I mean, especially a few years ago, if you'd go to any given open source CMS, we'd talk about really, really, really feature level, this, that, and the other thing. So the classic example that I like to give is Drupal or Typo3 or Sulu or what have you in the open source space will talk about, so of course we support WYSIWYG, drag and drop positioning. We can do left to right and right to left languages. Inline editing is supported if you have the database configuration done the right way. And That sounds pretty familiar. And you and I know what putting those pieces together means. But if that's on the front page of us promoting our CMS, we will never beat Adobe when Tracy is looking for a project, because you know what Adobe says? We give you business-friendly authoring. What is that? It doesn't matter. Right? Now, when we had to come in and work with a client to compare proprietary, beautifully marketed projects against wonderful open source projects with no marketing ever before, right? That's a really, really hard comparison to make. And, you know, we call something one way in Drupal, and in another project it's called another way. Like, is it a plugin or a module or an extension, for example, right? We can't make those comparisons until we have a common vocabulary, so we've had to develop a way to do these comparisons and find common language as well. And I think the most important part about communicating what we're about is building trust. And Francis Fai's definition of trust is really interesting because it ties back to our being about empathy, clarity, and trust in authentic communication. And Francis Fai, great TED talk that she did, by the way, if you're into that sort of thing. In 2018, she defined trust as having empathy with the person you're speaking with, using logical rigor, and being your authentic self, right? So, understanding the needs of the person you're speaking with, not talking bullshit to them, right? And just being yourself builds trust. And so when I heard that, I really felt that it validated how we've been thinking about trying to build good communications, and I was really happy. Heather James, anybody know her from the Drupal community? Yeah, so I'm really, really proud that Heather's one of our team members. And she came up with this idea that, especially as open source projects, we need to radiate trust signals for people then to be able to trust us. And I think this goes a long way. You know, the last point, for example, you really acknowledge that you're part of a community of people doing something, right? You don't make false promises, and you simply talk about what you're really, really about. So trust signals are something else that we look for in when we build communications. So our tooling to come up with a common language that builds that clarity and therefore trust. We have an internal tool that we call the value map. And this is one of our key tools. It's pretty much the basis of everything we do on a working level in implementing this authentic communication framework. And then we're going to talk about some fun marketing stuff really, really briefly, just to give you an idea of how we develop common language to talk about a given product. So let's remember our goal for a second. We have people who are working together and they're building something and it solves a real market need and we're sure people are going to buy it, but they are not able to talk about it in the same way. And because of that, they're communicating inconsistently and it's really, really hard to work efficiently and well under those circumstances. So we want to build a common way of talking about our product that defines what it is, what it does, and what value it delivers. Call it benefits, call it business value, but that's what we want to have, a common framework that we can use. So we're going to go through here these points, and when we work with companies, we insist that for the value map, target audience personas, communication goals, and core narratives work, that they work together with us. We do collaborative workshops, and there have to be technical teams there and business and management teams there, because everybody has a right and true and correct perspective on what they're doing, and everybody needs to get on board so that when we go out and communicate, we're all communicating the same way, right? And it's also when we then perhaps write things for them or help them prepare conference sessions or whatever we're doing with them, that we have, that when we do that, they're not surprised that we're writing something that they've never heard of, right? Because we've developed these materials together. So the value map is an inventory of statements structured in categories, and they're about features and benefits. So this is the big leveling that we had to do to understand how to compare different people talking about technologies that are competing with each other. So you analyze, you list out all the features that a given product has, and then each feature gets very, very, very brief notes on what that feature is, what it does, and what benefit it delivers, right? And for some products, it makes perfect sense at this point also to understand perhaps it could deliver different sorts of benefits for different audiences, and it's good to keep that in mind because you can go back and enrich this later once you've figured out who you're actually speaking with. Now, because we call these things business-friendly authoring or user experience or whatever, we need to sort those into categories. So we take given functionalities, features, and we sort them into the categories. And at that point, we are naming things and we can align. It doesn't matter how other people are talking about it. We can align this to make our apples to apples comparisons, right? And then every feature category that we build gets its own statement of what it is, what it does, how people benefit from that, right? So you could say, putting together all of those components that I mentioned before, and you talk about why it's important to support writing in both directions and what is good about inline editing. When you move up to a feature category that's called business-friendly authoring, then you could say, enables non-technical teams to get their work done better and more efficiently and focus on their job instead of futzing with technology, right? That would be an example of the value that having a good authoring experience delivers. And then you can, and at every stage you boil this up. Some very large products can have a meta stage between feature category and product. And then you get to your product. That's your CMS, that's your whatever it is that you do, perhaps. And you could have another product that's also broken down the same way and built up, the comparisons built up the same way. So at every stage, we're building language that everyone's agreed on, and then we can add things like, is this easy to implement or hard to implement? In Drupal, for example, implementing Adobe Print workflow integrations in Drupal, that's really, really hard and kind of pointless because it's an Adobe proprietary thing that they're never going to support or want you to do. So why prioritize that in your communications? Why talk about it? Why even worry about it? It's not something that we're ever going to do. So we can compare different products on a fair and even basis. We can catalog features. We can model choices and assess and whatever. But most importantly, we agree on what we actually have. From feature to functionality to product level, we have said what our thing is and what it does and what benefits it delivers all the way up. And we're all on the same page about that. And we now have a catalog. Anyone who's building communication can go and look at that and use the same language choices, right? This is really, really, really powerful as a communication tool. Because when we have common language of understanding, it becomes pretty clear and pretty easy to make consistent choices about what our positioning is. Do we follow a market leader? Are we defining a new niche? What are the priorities in our communication? Like what's easy and fast for us to deliver value with? What's really hard, right? I know which one I want to talk about first in my marketing, and then that helps us take action, and we have clarity across all of our assets. Our sales pitches match, our technical demos match whatever it is that we're communicating, right? Our technical documentation and so on. So this is the core thing that we do at Open Strategy Partners. This is the first thing we do with every client, and we revisit it sometimes every few months depending on, the speed of development and what's going on. So getting over into regular marketing land, we tie this into the idea of who's your target audience. Who would you like to sell to? Who has the sort of problem that your thing solves? Where do they work? What sort of company are they at? What sort of technologies do they choose? Are they in developer teams? Do they have a need for what you're offering? And do they have money to buy that? Where are they located? And so on. And this helps you make some choices about how to then, what sort of communications are going to be appropriate. Is it events? Is it print magazines? Is it television? Is it blog posts? Is it Twitter? And if you're going to reach out, if you're going to choose events, like what sort of events would you go to and so on. So it's just like the general, ideally we think this is where our product fits well and there's budget for us to help them. And then the persona, so I'm not an educated marketer. I don't have any degrees in anything like that. And the difference between target audience and persona took me a while to pull apart in my own head. The persona is then one or more specific people, ideally people that you know, who fit within the roles and jobs and in the target audience. So you might have, and then it's typical to give them these names like, marketer Mary, senior developer Simon, and so on. But we have personas for some of our clients that are built from, the tech lead at an actual client, the business owner at an actual competing company, and so on. People that we actually know and have interacted with well enough to really have a feeling for, are they experts in their field? How long have they been working on it? What do they really care about? What are their business goals? And what are the problems for them delivering in their businesses? What are their responsibilities, skills, likes and dislikes? And then the last 3 points I find especially interesting, especially because we work in an open source context at OSP. So whom do you trust information from, right? So an open source developer, we really, really trust opening up the damn code and checking it, right? And if we can't do that ourselves, we really, really want to be able to play with it or have a colleague that we know and trust who's opened this thing up and played with it, right? And so this whole trust issues is really important there. And then who does our persona influence and who are they influenced by? What do they listen to? What do they think about? Were you putting up your hand? Yeah. I forgot a thing.
No, can I just summarize just a quick differentiation between the target audience and the persona?
And then I'll repeat it on the microphone, yes.
Yes, okay. So target audience is the broad definition of where you want to place your marketing effort. So it's the type of developer or the type of organization that you want to reach at all. And then the persona is an example character that helps you better create empathy because you're putting a name to the person, you're putting attributes to that person, so it allows you in your communication to visualize and empathize with who that might be. And so that's a persona.
Let me see if I can get that right for the microphone. The target audience is
where you want to spend your effort.
Right, exactly. That helps you decide. The target audience decides where you're going to invest marketing time and money. And then a persona is a real or fictitious person that you hold in your mind so that you then have a conversation with them or you write a blog post with them in mind or whatever the materials you're creating. You know how they think and how they feel about certain things. And that helps you model those sorts of choices. Yes?
Can I translate that in a technical way, like a class and an instance?
Yes. So that's great, and I'm going to keep that. Exactly. So the target audience is a class, and the persona is a specific instance of that class. Yes. And then you can have one class and many instances. That makes perfect sense. Yes. Thank you. That's great. I'm going to keep that one. So when we've defined all this, then we have, right? We know what it is, what it does, what it delivers. We know where we think it should fit. Now we want to know what stories connect those things. What stories connect our product to the people we'd really, really like to use it. Now, want to just pull back a second and remind you that the kind of marketing that we do marketing for people to adopt free open source stuff, to grow open source communities, to be better writers and communicators for themselves, as well as doing marketing to sell stuff and generate revenue. We've done a lot of developer focused things that are not classic business stuff. One of our clients is Drud Tech. They build the DDev Local development environment. How many people have used DDev here? Nobody? One buddy? Two buddy? Okay. Yeah, so DDev's cool. It's a really, really great local development environment. It's really, really good for PHP. It's got container images ready to go for Drupal 7 and Drupal 8. And I think for Thunder as well, there's one. And it's really, really powerful, really excellent local development environment. They are building a hosting platform so you can have a seamless local development environment to online containerized hosting in a single go. and everything's compatible and consistent, but you can use the local tool, and it's open source, and it's free to do your development for any kind of project hosted anywhere. It's really, really nice, and they've built a real community around it. So some of the core narratives, some of the stories that we've been helping them tell is like, oh, hey, they're container experts, and they know Kubernetes really, really well. One of the marketing actions that I'm really proud of that we did, this thing, support and enable open source contribution sprints. Apart from sending people to help mentor and so on, they built instances of DDev Local to help core sprints at DrupalCon. And we authored and co-released with them a guide on how to have a brilliant contribution sprint. Like how to run a great sprint and what to think of and what to do. And Heather James was responsible for most of this, and she's awesome, and thank you, Heather. But we released this on GitHub as an open source project that you can go and download and use and modify and help us with, co-branded with our company and their company. And it's, it's because this is really open source and they've really got their heart in the right place, and we really felt that supporting sprints in general was a great positioning for getting their open source tool into developer hands, right? So all of these sort of stories, ship better, faster software, and so on. So we'll take a selection of core narratives in any given period, and this depends on the phase of the company and what your goals are. Grow adoption, grow sales, grow a partner network, whatever that is. We'll figure out the stories to tell. To some degree, then you have to decide, okay, so we're going to tell those stories. How are we going to tell them, right? And in what channels, and that determines kind of what format. And this is where this is a combination of magic and science, I think. It makes perfect sense that if you're trying to reach an open source project that 70% of this doesn't make any sense, right? But if you're trying to reach commercial adopters, people who build, iOS apps, and they need a solution for something to make their apps better, some of these paid options, some of these other things could really make a lot of sense. So we've focused over time, we've focused a lot on things like open source community engagement and so on, but there's a huge world of legitimate channels that we assess, and we basically talk about the right sort of watering holes and the right sort of what would be good to get that message out, and then and that determines sort of what formats you tell your stories in. And once we've done that, then it's time to build campaigns, and campaigns roll together everything else that we've already thought about. And so in our case, we'll probably build an editorial plan, design and create content for that, and then figure out a publishing cadence, and then of course where it goes out and so on. But there's some other campaigns as well, and this is an idea of this empathy map is sort of a version of the buyer's journey, if you've heard this. So we've done this with a couple of different instances, but let's say that I really need contributors to my project. I really want to get more contributors to my project. I have to capture their attention. How am I going to capture someone's attention? What format is that going to be? Well, they saw a tweet, right? Or they saw one of your users tweet something about it. They read a blog post about this problem that you're solving. You got their attention. Okay, so tweet and blog, that's a pretty good solution nowadays. And then, you need to develop interest. You need them to develop interest in the thing that you're offering, right? So you really, really want them to get over to your repo on GitHub, right? Because that's how they're going to build trust in your solution. They're going to look at what it does. They're going to look at your code. They're going to look at the state of your queue, how responsive you are, how up-to-date the thing is. So, your README has to be really good. You have to be responsive. And your repo has to give off those trust signals, right? That your project's alive, that you're paying attention to it, right? Okay, so if they got interested in that and your Git repo lived up to your blog post, they have enough trust in your product to download it and try it. Awesome. And it works pretty well for them, but they hit a problem. And so they need to get some help with it. They go to your Slack channel or they go to your GitHub account, and they put in an issue, right? How responsive are you? Do you pay attention to them? Do you answer them in an hour or a day or in a week or not at all, right? That's a huge decider of whether they're going to invest in you any further. But let's say you're great. You wrote smart things, you have a good product, your online materials are good, you're responsive enough, and like, okay, I'm in. They fix the bug and they submit a patch, and all of a sudden they've made a contribution, and they're part of your community, right? So there's a journey where you have to, promote what you've done. You have to have built a good thing and kept it really clean and tidy and well presented on GitHub or wherever you have it. Be responsive, be involved, be communicative, and that is a campaign design around getting people to contribute. And this is not at all what people would normally call a marketing campaign, but this is very much something that we've codified and thought about a lot. We can use the same map to get investment money. You have to have an elevator pitch. You have to have a one-pager to send them. You have to show that the product meets a market need. So you have to show them that you're doing something that people are talking about in the world that's a problem, right? And then you have to build trust in your team. Have they built successful companies before? Yes. Okay. Then boom, success. They give you money, and you keep going with your product. So this is a model that we can apply to a lot of situations. So, in the end, hopefully, then the ideal outcome is that you get, where's my marketer? There's my marketer, right? Thing does something, and it helps you deliver more of something else faster. And everybody is talking in the same way. They understand what they have, what it is, what it does, what it delivers. The investor gets it if that's your target. The adopter gets it if that's your target. You get customers, whatever. You need to build a catalog. So you need to use your tools, put yourself in someone's shoes. You need to be clear. You need to build trust. And then as a team between tech and business, you really need to build a perfectly a clear picture that everyone is bought into and everyone has helped create of what it is that you're dealing with and how it helps other people. And that'll let you communicate that to the outside world and succeed with it. And at the same time, you've built real trust and cooperation inside of your organization. And I'm really, really happy to say that this is the sort of thing that I get to do, a lot of hours every week, maybe too many hours. Please don't forget to come to the Splash Awards today. And thank you very much for coming to my session. I'm sure we have time for questions. That was a very fast session for me. That's cool. Imre.
Yes. So, I think this is great stuff, that it will appeal to many clients that are willing to make the next step. Would you reckon that if you do this, that you need to have someone in the client organization in place that's really understanding this and willing to push this within management and embrace this? If you don't have somebody on board, like an ambassador for what you're doing, they will say, oh great, thanks, and then just go on with whatever it was they were doing. Is it necessary, you think?
So I think that if you don't have someone bought, I'm going to try and repeat the question. If you don't have someone bought into this methodology and achieving these goals, if you don't have a champion within the organization, I don't think you're going to sign a contract with us to do this, right? And we're also going to go in and explain pretty carefully that this is going to require, X number of online workshops or like 2 days in person or whatever it is, and 6 weeks of work for this and 4 weeks of work for that. We're pretty clear up front that we thought we were going to be a communications agency. We've turned into a very strategic organization, and we don't come down and sit down and blog for you, right? And we're going to deliver value the first month, the second month, the third month, but it's not till some point down the road that we're actually going to deliver public communications for you if that's what you need. So we spend a lot of time finding the right clients, and if they don't want this, then we're not going to work with them. And I guess I should also clarify some of our self-identity. Apart from bridging this business technology gap, we think that we're especially effective for small, high-value organizations. So internal teams or startups of some kind, where you've bought a team of 10 experts maybe, and they're supposed to be delivering thing, right? And everyone is supposed to be delivering their expertise, and senior developers are pretty expensive. And it's a really hard ask to also tell your senior developer, like, you have to go and do full-time marketing as well, and I need you to blog, and I need you to do this, and I need you to do that. It's very expensive, and it's not the best use of your time, and it's not what they're being paid to do. So we can come in, once we've built this sort of understanding, and create communications in cooperation with the senior developer, with whoever it is in the company, that are authentic and compelling, that they're happy to put their name under, because we've worked with them very, very carefully. And so we can help build communications that use a lot, that are really good, that use a lot less of their time than they would if they had to do them on their own, right? And we feel that we're there to expand the marketing bandwidth of this kind of an organization. It's sort of outsourced marketing, something like that.
Can I add to this question?
Yes.
I also think that if you're trying to apply some of these models or frameworks with an existing client, I think there are smart ways that you can persuade them to see value of your methodology. And I think that that's easier done partially in a holistic way, but also piece by piece. So if you're trying to convince them, we need to stop and do a value map, and we need to come to an agreement of what the product is that you're trying to deliver so that we can be consistent in our communication. I think that you can sort of break it down into smaller pieces and convince them of the value of that piece. And then when they see the results of that, you're gaining more trust to be able to ask to implement the other pieces.
Yeah, and we've also, over time, we've gained confidence in our methodology, and we're still refining it and still working on it. But we can now pretty confidently come into a lot of organizations and just sell you an engagement that gives you the value map, right? And then you have a catalog of all these features and everything it does, and we can walk away. And if you want more, then we can do a strategic workshop and work out all the positioning and where everything goes. And then we can give you that, and we can walk away. And if you need communications help, we can come back and we can build you an editorial plan, core narratives, publishing schedule, format, suggestions, everything charted out. You can have that, and we can walk away. If you need someone to help implement and write communications, then we're there for you too. So we're sort of, our process has turned into, we've sort of been able to productize it and deliver value at every stage. We had trouble in the beginning. We had an intuitive understanding of where we needed to get, but we were just kind of swimming along a long way. And we made all the mistakes and didn't really know how to deliver value incrementally and in milestones and so on. But, luckily we've had the chance to get it right now. Anyone else? Lunchtime? No? Yes?
Just one short. Do you have something like an example value map?
An example value map that I can show you. Yes. Maybe not completely publicly, but I can show you something.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. All right. Thanks, everyone. Let's go have lunch.